What's up, y'all? KM Best here with 6 decks to play on the first day of this brave new world after the craziest OTA in Marvel Snap history. Deck number 1 is an early frontrunner for best deck in the format, and that is going to be Thanos Control. This is the deck that I recommended that people play in my patch video, and I am standing by that recommendation. There are still some things to figure out, of course. I am still running Mobius and Mobius, but that is a true flex slot at this point. It could be Shang-Chi, it could be Luke Cage, it could be pretty much whatever you want in that spot. I'm running Mobius out of the deference to the fact that I just don't know if our Loki matchup is good yet. And if our Loki matchup isn't good, I'm going to want the Mobius in the deck, especially because I think Lokis will be seeing a lot less rogue in their lists, meaning that Mobius is going to actually stick and damage their game plan a lot more. So I am into it in that context. That said, true flex slot. I've seen people running Thanos with Rogue and Shang-Chi, which I think is an interesting innovation, but ultimately one I wanted to stray away from for this list. Now, the reason I wanted to stray away from that is because it sort of takes away from your baseline Thanos game plan, which is play a lot of ones early, then on turn 4 you play A5, on turn 5 you play A5, on turn 6 you play A6, and that is the general way Thanos wants to play out. You're not going to find a lot of targets for Rogue and Shang-Chi on those early turns of the game. That said, because they are unexpected, I consider them very viable inclusions in the list, because sometimes, it doesn't matter that you're not using your energy efficiently if you're roguing or Shang-Chiing something as dangerous as, say, a Darkhawk, right? It's very, very hard for them to come back from that, even if it's not the most efficient use of your energy. Now, we are including Nico Minoru here. This is her best fit as far as decks go, I think, maybe this and Destroy. And I do think that she is not necessarily required, but a big part of the consistency of this list. You are not using her for everything, but her turning a thing into a demon is obviously good. Drawing 2 cards is obviously good. Copying your Elsa is pretty solid, although honestly, it's less copying your Elsa at this point and more copying the thing that you buff with your Elsa. So getting a 2/5 Jeff or something as a Professor X deck, you're very interested in that a lot of the time. And that ability can help to smooth out those later turns where you otherwise wouldn't be using your energy efficiently with something like Shang-Chi or Rogue. Like I said, if you wanted to put those in, I would have no problem with it. I think the proactive, powerful build of this deck is the best way to play it right now, but obviously that's because it's day 1 in the metagame, and so we are doing the powerful, proactive thing. As the metagame develops, we might end up including more reactive tech in this deck. I can't wait to find out. Next up is Destroy, and this list is just sort of very straightforwardly a good deck for Nico, but there is one issue that I want to highlight with Nico Minoru and the Destroy list that is very, very important. This spell is a lot of the reason why you're playing Nico Minoru in this list. Getting beneficial destructions is very, very cool. Drawing cards is very, very cool. Here's the issue, though. When you use this spell on a card that has a replacement effect when it gets destroyed. So Wolverine, X-23, Deadpool, these are all cards that say, when this dies, do something else, the game will crash. So the game will crash when you do this, and it can run the risk of not letting you reconnect. Every time I've tried it, it has let me reconnect, but it's definitely not an optimal thing, which is very frustrating because this is a really good deck. Like, I really think this is a great fit for Nico Minoru especially. You get to include some anti-location tech that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and this actually works on Nowhere as long as you don't play Nico on Nowhere. You get to get extra copies of your Carnage and your Venom, and they keep the power they got from eating stuff. And you're already a deck that plays Forge, so you're definitely interested in 1/2 Forge if you could pull it off. In addition, we have Lady Deathstrike in order to blow up opposing Mobius M Mobiuses, and that's important because we are still playing Death, and if they play a Mobius and we have to blow it up in order to play our Death, well, we need some good ways of doing that. Lady Deathstrike, of course, is a great way of doing that. Now, Nico Minoru copying stuff is not just limited to things like Lady Deathstrike and to the stuff that blows stuff up. Imagine, for example, copying an X-23 with Nico Minoru, and suddenly you're getting double the energy that you would from a normal X-23. That's pretty powerful too. There's just a lot of applications for a lot of different Nico Minoru spells in this list, and she gives you a lot of very powerful abilities that you otherwise would not have access to. So this, along with Thanos, are very, very good fits for her, and I think this deck is actually like a lot more dependent on her than the Thanos deck is, because she just makes it so much better than it otherwise would be, and it was already pretty good before Nico and before all the nerfs to everything that competed with it. That said, you do have some very defined weaknesses. People are playing Spectrum stuff, which means there's some Cosmos out there, there's some Armors out there, and that's pretty scary for you because they kind of shut down the entire thing your deck is doing. That said, this is a genuine contender here. I have never been as high on Destroy as I am right now. I think this is the right time for it when people are still figuring out what the meta is. Run them over with something incredibly powerful. Next up is the traditional build of Darkhawk, and this is a deck that I think is likely good in response to the Thanos deck, which is the first deck we talked about here. Thanos typically has a poor matchup into Darkhawk, not just because Darkhawk itself is very, very big, but also because putting rocks in a Thanos deck slows them down significantly. Now, them including Nico Minoru and her potential to draw 2 cards does sort of get them out of those situations some of the time, so that is not negligible, right? In addition, however, we have a Man-Thing here, which is an unbelievable card against Thanos, and that second really good card against Thanos, in addition to Darkhawk, we have the Man-Thing. Like, that is very hard for them to deal with, right? They can't really rogue a Man-Thing because it still keeps that ability there. And most of the things that they're playing in the early game, you have a pretty good idea of where the Man-Thing is just going to be absolutely game-winning. And Thanos is not really in the business of playing Luke Cage. It's not a very common card, and you definitely need to if you want to counter the Man-Thing. So they're also thinking about cutting Mobius a little bit more, which means if you want to be more of a Zabu-reliant deck, maybe you could go that direction as well. There's a lot of power in this deck, and a lot of specifically targeted, aimed at Thanos power. And I think that's probably a good place to be as well. Now, there's some stuff in here that I don't like, right? I don't like that we don't have America Chavez. I get why we have the Dr. Doom, but I don't know how necessary it is. And I think specifically the Dr. Doom is worth talking about because the main thing that Dr. Doom does is in games where you otherwise would be using Zabu to target 2 lanes on the final turn, and they have a Mobius, so you can't do that, Dr. Doom is what lets you do that, right? That's why he's there. If there ends up being less Mobius in the metagame, or we feel comfortable with how we match up into it, I can very much see replacing Doom with a Chavez. Shuri's reaction to the nerf to Sauron is basically, oh no! Anyway, I'm going to keep doing exactly what I was already doing, which is playing Shuri into a bunch of big stuff. This is the baseline Shuri list in my opinion. Luke Cage is now in here over Mobius because I expect Loki decks to be a little bit weaker, and because Luke Cage helps prevent Shadow King from making our stats not necessarily irrelevant, but not game-winning, right? The whole premise of the Shuri list is that you're making something that's so big that it cannot reasonably be contested. And if you are making something that is not so big that it cannot reasonably be contested, and Shadow King does that to you, you're kind of in trouble. Now, obviously, you're not really playing late Luke Cages a lot, especially in a Sauron list, but there's basically nothing wrong with going, hey, I'm going to play my Luke Cage on turn 2, and then I'm going to Sauron. That's still totally fine. You also get some value out of being an armor list, given, I do expect Destroy to be kind of a real deck, and being an armor list that just sort of proactively just gets to have that card in your deck and armor up their Deadpool lane, that's pretty good too. I'm not really sure where to begin with Loki. I'm not actually positive that the Loki collector package got worse overall. Collector's 2 points really does matter. Loki going to a 4/5 makes him less flexible, but still quite powerful. There are some issues, though. I honestly think the biggest thing that got hurt this deck was the nerf to Angela. And Angela is such an important card in the list, and she is so mediocre here that it's honestly very hard to deal with. One of the things I'm kind of wondering is all right, can we get Quinjet back in here? Is that a thing we can do? But until I figure that out, here is just a default Loki list that you can start with and move from. I'm not even putting any tech in there right now. I do think, if I'm playing this list, I do want to replace like Coulson with Shang-Chi or something like that. But I just want to give you the default so that you can play around with it. One other thing I was kicking around is like, can we be like a Zabu Loki list? Is there going to be a lack of Mobius that pronounced that we can try Zabu Loki? I haven't really gotten there. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that's true, but it is an interesting sort of thing to think about, because one of the things that I'd really like to do in my Loki deck is I really want to include Killmonger right now. I feel like Killmonger is at his best in Thanos metas, because Thanos plays itself out in such a way where a lot of the early game is 1-cost cards and then the end game is just one big guy a turn. And if you can destroy that early game, those one big guy a turn plays are just not game winning enough. And so using a Killmonger on turn 3 is a very powerful play against Thanos. A lot of the time, you're usually blowing up like 2 or 3 guys that they're really counting on. A Soul Stone, a Power Stone, things like that, right? Maybe even a Nico Minoru Demon. And that you're also preventing them from getting Elsa procs, the whole 9 yards, right? It's a very good card right now. And I think one way to fit Killmonger into the Loki context would be to be a bit of a bigger Loki deck and not be reliant on all of this 1-cost stuff. But I haven't actually like put that into practice. It's just an idea that's been dancing around in my head. This is the default Loki list. Start here, modify as necessary. I do think I'd prefer Shang-Chi over Agent Coulson, but I just wanted to give you, this is the baseline, right? Start here, make your changes. Finally, I've got a little spice for you. I pulled this straight up from Untapped. I did not come up with this. I do not know who did, but it looks super, super cool. And I just wanted to highlight it as like a sort of alt Darkhawk build. You're giving up a little bit of disruption in exchange for the potential endgame power of Wong Spectrum. And you're doing this, you get Zabu, that's ongoing. You get Luke Cage, that's ongoing. You get Lizard, that's ongoing. All your stuff is ongoing. Darkhawk ongoing. Man-Thing ongoing. You have a lot of things that are actually ongoing, and you can really put points on the board with a deck like this. One of the things that I do think is that this is the kind of deck that shows up early, and then when people realize what it's doing, it gets teched out of the metagame very easily. But I just wanted to give an example of like a deck that I saw that actually has good numbers behind it, that looks like it's using Spectrum well, because I think a lot of people wrote that off as a buff to early game cards, and maybe it ends up being like that, but I did want to just throw this on there. This is the spicy pick of the video, so if you're here looking for spice, here's the spicy one. This is the one that actually looks interesting to me. It looks pretty cool. I do worry there are like some very obvious counters, like, Mobius, right? Like, this deck does not want to see Mobius. This deck really does not want to see Cosmo, even though, okay, they Cosmo you and you just play it elsewhere. It feels like it's very much built to Wong into stuff, right? You Wong into extra rocks, Wong into Spectrum, things like that. I do think that it's like a very interesting conception, though, to me, and I'm glad people are exploring this, and so I wanted to get it out there. If you know whose list this was, please let me know. I will put it in the comments below and then give them whatever credit they so desire, because one of the things about the deck trackers is it sort of flattens out deck credit. I try to give deck credit where I can. I haven't seen this list anywhere except on Untapped, but that doesn't mean someone didn't make it and then Untapped track their stats, so I don't actually know. All right, y'all. I've been Cam Best. Thank you so much for watching this video. I just wanted to do a quick decks I'm interested in video because I know people love that kind of stuff early in the metagame. I will be streaming these decks later in the day on twitch.tv/KMBestMS, and I'll be streaming Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Longer streams than normal, so please do check me out over there. Of course, if you got this far in the video, that means you liked it or you fell asleep. In that case, wake up and press the little subscribe button, please. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful for the support I've received, and I plan on taking that support, reinvesting it into the channel, and doing my best to like bust my ass and make better content. And I really appreciate all the support that I've gotten to get me this far, and I hope that I can find ways to feed it back to you. So thank you so much. As always, I've been Cam Best. You be good. I will see you in the next one. I didn't wink. Oh my God. Oh my, okay, take 2.